Welcome to Honest Whispers Review. On this video I'll be reviewing JLA Series 1 Wonder Woman action figure. It was released by DC Direct back in November 26, 2003. It's designed by Bryan Hitch and sculpted by Shoop. This figure is approximately 6.5 inches tall, but with the base she is approximately 6 3/4 inches tall. I'm going to go over 5 different categories to review this. First category is design, which basically covers the look, the concept, and the points of articulations. And this one, as you can see, does have an overall nice looking, it just looks nice overall. And believe it or not, this is the 7th action figure produced for Wonder Woman. And she existed for like 62 years by the time of this release, and this is the first figure where it actually made her look good. You can see from the start she has a pretty face, very feminine looking. Body overall looks very nice and has natural, realistic proportions with feminine proportions. Prior figures really didn't have much. A very good example would be the Superpowers figure, where it looked very stubby, bulky, and unproportioned. And the face, when you look at the Superpowers figure face, it is kind of ugly looking. So this one definitely I guess a pioneer like figure, you can say, because even the lasso, this was the first figure to use a metallic fabric coil lasso. Nicely designed. It was put in an open hook, but very sturdy, stable. The lasso doesn't really move, and I never had to adjust it or anything like that. And this was the first figure or series of figures to release a base. Unfortunately, the base came with it's a universal base. It's the same exact base for all the figures in this in all the series of the same line. But unfortunately, the whole peg hole is on the right foot only, so all these left holes, no matter which figure you have, are pretty much useless. These holes right here. Otherwise, they'll be standing off the platform, or the JLA logo would be upside down. The reason why I chose this, basically initially, I had the base on sideways, her facing forward, but that position gave it so that she was not stepping on the JLA logo, so you could see the logo clearly. But now my preference is, due to her stability, as you can see, even without the peg, very stable, I either have the figure in the center of the base like this, or I don't use the base at all. So it's kind of a plus and minus, but still definitely, well, I can't say ahead of its time, but definitely a breakthrough figure in many ways. Another certain flaw I have, which is very minor, and you can't tell unless you're looking really up close or really examining at it kind of closely, which is the head. I think the head proportion is just slightly bigger than her body, especially when you compare the size of her head to the size of her shoulders. Just seems head just slightly bigger than it should be. And I feel like her butt in the back, because in the front her costume and proportions look pretty much good. It might be because of the way the belt is, but it's more noticeable in the back, where it feels like her butt just seems too narrow, too flat, and slightly too tall vertically. So just her, like the way her waist, it just seems like her waistline here in the back is just slightly too high. So it slightly gives it an unproportioned look. And for me, the belt, it doesn't bother me too much, but if I had a preference, I would rather like the back of the belt to have both, top and bottom to be parallel horizontally. I don't really like this upside down, I guess, triangle, or the point on the bottom part like this. Although it's not bad, I've seen many versions with their costume have it, so it's not like it's completely off or anything. But I think that might kind of add to the unproportioned part. Even the front, the sculpted abs, just even from afar, it just tends to be too noticeable. And the belt starts looking like a wrestling championship belt slightly. But overall, very good looking figure, and at the same time, it's pretty much 15 years old. So even now, after so many more action figures released, still one of the best looking figures out there. So I give the design score a high 8 out of 10. Next category is sculpting, which basically covers the details, execution, and the quality of the sculpt, or molding rather. And as you can see from the start, or from the top, a lot of good details on the hair. I do like how it has very natural strands. The hair gets lumpy and where it's kind of curvy or curly. Well, not curly, but wavy on the bottom area. So definitely like the natural details on that. Tiara seems slightly off or crooked. I know her head's slightly in an angle like this, but even though, if you look at the top point of the tiara, align it with the star, and then the bottom of the tiara, just slightly seems crooked, especially the bottom part. You can see how it just kind of comes a little higher, while this one is a little bit more lower on the curvature. Face overall and head, other than the proportion or the size, very nicely sculpted. Any angle, she still looks pretty good. Her neck, you can see some details there. Great details on her chest plate, very consistent. Her breasts, nicely proportioned. Some good muscle definition, like on her arm, shoulder particularly, and her thighs, not too skinny and not too muscular. And I like how her thighs, they didn't like cut out her upper thighs or anything, so everything fits pretty nicely. And the boots, nice natural wrinkles, especially around the ankle area. So it definitely looks like she's wearing, realistically wearing leather boots. And notice the hand, she doesn't come with a sword or any accessories, but I don't know, my theory is that they might have used a pre-existing hand and sculpted over it, or maybe thought they might have released accessories in the future. But other than that, the hands itself, especially the closed fist one, nicely looking, very nice proportion. Now, as far as the casting quality or the molding quality goes, you could see this very huge, noticeable, thick seam line on the right, from her right knee and boot. Not as much on her left boot. And very noticeable seam line here on her right arm, while her left arm, it is noticeable, but you can see it's not as much. So very noticeable difference between, you know, the two arms, two legs, areas like that. So minor flaw there. But otherwise, like even down to like her earrings and everything, overall done really well. Even to now, 15 years after, still looking good and looking like one of the best figures out there. So I give the sculpting score a high 8 out of 10. Next category is colors. Colors basically covers the accuracy of the colors, quality of the paint, and quality of the applications. And as you can see, colors definitely accurate. I do like the tone of the red, the blue. The gold's not bad. I would have rather like to see it more shinier, or like if they used a metallic. Everything's pretty much matte finish except for the boots. Boots for some reason have this nice gloss finish. So I guess they decided to separate I guess the leather fabric with either her spandex or satin fabric. That could possibly be her costume. Nice silver colors on the bracelets and everything. As far as the application, biggest flaw for me is the eyes. Although the pupils or the eyes itself are symmetrically aligned, the size of the eyes are not the same. You can see that her right eye is slightly bigger than her left eye. So even at light here, especially because the shadow makes it light slightly worse. Like her eye line right there on her left eye, it's just darker and everything. So it just makes her left eye, it just gives her a slight googly eye effect. But that's something you have to look very closely with, because at a pretty much normal distance or from afar, eyes and face look pretty good and less noticeable. Imprinting of the stars, overall nicely done. You can see how in the front everything looks pretty much aligned, everything's symmetrical. Unfortunately on the back, not as good. You can see here down the middle, all the stars in her butt crack area just pretty much unaligned, everything's off. And then there's this one star that's kind of split in two pieces, and as you can see, the star is slightly off, obviously, and this is her default position. So the star, at least the imprinting of the stars on the bottom, and there's even the one on the very bottom that's like it's missing in the middle. So I think it should have been slightly higher, and at the same time, if you look at the joints closely, or the points of articulation, the right hip, the top line of the right hip, it has a slightly more gap than the left hip. So even that's not quite fitting, and you can see there's a flat edge of a right hip sticking out more. So unfortunately I didn't mention that in the sculpting, but that's one of the reasons why I gave the sculpting a slight hit. Now back to the colors. You can see there's some blue bleeding on her panty line right there, and there is a bit of a gap right here on her, on the top line, her right breast. So right there, the red, it almost looks like it's chewed off or ripped off, so they didn't finish the edge right there. and just very minor flaws here, like on the white line of her boot. Just tends to get a little bit wiggly, and even the point right there on her outer edge, red point, you can see that white on that little point. So otherwise, rest is looking pretty good. There is this slight edge right here on the white that's slightly bleeding on the border, but because the line is straight, it's hardly noticeable. All the lines in the back and the edges very solidly painted, nicely done. So the colors, other than the eye, the lipstick and earrings, even that's pretty nice, you know, nicely done. The star and the tiara just slightly seems just slightly off, like the top area, or in other words, even slightly crooked, so the angles. And then you can see on the top of the tiara there is some black bleeding onto the tiara. So very minor flaws. Overall, the painting very solidly done, and you know, just looks good overall. So I give the painting score, unfortunately due to the eyes and those minor flaws, could have been a lot better, but I give the painting score a solid 8 out of 10. Or rather the color score, 8 out of 10. Next category is value. Value basically covers the retail cost versus quality, retail cost versus aftermarket value, and also even aftermarket value versus quality. So this one, when it first came out, it was around, I can't remember exactly how much, but it was around $10–12. And right now there isn't any used one. When I researched this, right now the cheapest new one that's still in package is $33, which covers the shipping. Next cheapest is $34, and then the next cheapest new one that I've seen is $39, and from there everything averages around like $39 to $40 or above. So it definitely does have some aftermarket value, and as I mentioned, even for something 15 years old, still one of the best looking Wonder Woman figures ever made, just due to its the way the face it's just made it kind of really, they made it pretty looking compared to the other figures that might look a little too masculine, slightly ugly, or unproportioned. Now, I would have expected this to have a little bit more aftermarket value, but unfortunately, for something 15 years old, still not bad aftermarket value. So I would probably give the value score a pretty high one, especially because even now, if you paid like $35 right now for this figure, a new one, definitely would be worth it. I could see this figure continue to go up in value over time. Just not as high or fast as I would have expected, but still definitely consistently, like 10 years from now, definitely will be higher in aftermarket value for sure. So due to that, I give the value score a solid 7. A solid 7 out of 10. Final category is overall. Overall basically accounts for the 4 prior categories: design, sculpting, colors, and value. And for me, this was initially something I was going to put up for sale, but after closer look and examination, this is something I really can't let go. Still, definitely something I'm gonna hold on to a bit longer. Just the way it looks, and it's very well, I don't hate, it's not unique, but at least they didn't reproduce this figure like they did with many of the other figures or designs. So it definitely does have some rarity to it. So for me, I give the overall score an 8 out of 10. So to recap: design, 8 out of 10. Sculpting, 8 out of 10. Colors, 8 out of 10. Value, 7 out of 10. And overall, 8 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Until next time, eat your vitamins, say your prayers.